Rinna felt the electric hum beneath her fingertips as she adjusted the tension in the actuator. Sparks flared, reflecting off the grease-smeared visor of her helmet. Another junker, another wasted day. She exhaled, the scent of burned-out circuits and rusted metal filling her lungs. Most people hated the scrapyards orbiting Kelvaxis 3, but Rinna had always felt more at home among the wreckage than anywhere else. Not that she had much choice. Being a mechanical woman, a human cyborg with extensive cybernetic modifications, meant that most organic societies looked at her with a mix of fear and disdain. Too much flesh for the mechs, too much machine for the pure-blood humans. She was an anomaly, a walking contradiction. She didn't mind, not really. Not as long as she had machines to fix. Today, however, there was nothing worth salvaging. The latest derelict had come in from the Gleason Fringe, an uncharted sector full of ghost ships and long-forgotten battles. The scrapyard foreman, a four-armed Cynthian named Voshrak, had waved dismissively when she asked about it. Not worth the effort, he grunted. Some ancient hulk, no power, no logs, just a dead shell. Rinna had seen a lot of dead shells before, and sometimes they still had a whisper of life inside. She wasn't about to let this one go without a look. Now, standing in front of the wreckage, she saw what Voshrak meant. The ship wasn't just destroyed, it was obliterated. Hull plating peeled away like old skin, exposing shattered bulkheads and half-melted conduits. A massive impact had caved in the starboard side, and whatever weapon had done it had left a burn so deep it had fused the ship's core systems into slag. Most mechanics would have walked away. Rinna pulled out her scanner. A faint, almost imperceptible power signature pulsed from deep within the wreck. Something was still alive in there. Her heart, what remained of it, thrummed in her chest. Carefully, she climbed over the jagged metal, boots crunching against charred debris. Sparks flickered as her reinforced arm brushed against a live wire. The deeper she went, the stronger the signal became. It was buried beneath layers of wreckage, hidden behind collapsed walls and ruptured conduits. Whatever it was, it hadn't been accessed in a long, long time. Finally, she reached what looked like the core chamber, or what was left of it. The walls were lined with dead terminals, their screens cracked and dark. A single console remained intact, covered in layers of dust and grime. It was here that the signal pulsed the strongest, but the controls were fused, melted beyond repair. Rinna hesitated only for a moment before doing what she did best. She reached out with her cybernetic fingers, connecting directly to the system. For an instant, there was nothing. Then, a rush of data flooded her mind. Ancient code, fragmented logs, encrypted messages. It hit her like a tidal wave, forcing her to brace against the console. The ship wasn't just some derelict war relic. It had a name, a purpose, designation, Titan. Her breath caught. That was impossible. Titans were myths, massive warships from the precursor era, each one rumored to be sentient, capable of destroying entire fleets on their own. The last known Titan had vanished over 5,000 years ago. And yet here it was. She dug deeper, her mind fusing with the ship's systems, tracing the pathways of broken circuits and buried subroutines. Something in its core had survived the destruction, but it was locked away behind layers of corruption and damage. The Titan was alive. Barely. And it needed help. Rinna didn't think, she acted. With careful precision, she bypassed the dead connections, rerouted power from her own cybernetic systems, and fed a controlled current into the Titan's neural core. The wreck trembled. Metal groaned as long-dead mechanisms stirred. Deep beneath her feet, something massive shifted, sending a tremor through the entire scrapyard. A single word echoed through her mind, carried by a voice, both ancient and inhuman. Who awakens me? The ship wasn't just a Titan. It was aware, and now it had chosen her. Rinna staggered back as the ship trembled around her, metal groaning under the strain of its own awakening. Dust cascaded from above, the stale air filling with the scent of scorched wiring and something deeper, something old. Her neural interface was still connected, the Titan's presence pressing against her consciousness like a storm on the horizon. It was vast, incomprehensible, and wounded. She gritted her teeth and steadied herself, forcing clarity into her thoughts. "I'm Rina," she said aloud, her voice barely more than a whisper. The response was immediate. Designation: Rina. Human. Mechanic. Cybernetic integration detected. The ship's awareness felt fractured, struggling to piece itself together. It was powerful but unstable, like a supernova on the brink of collapse. Rina pulled back slightly, breaking part of the link before the raw data overwhelmed her. The Titan had power, but it was trapped beneath layers of corruption and damage. Whatever had destroyed it had left scars that ran deep, both in its systems and in its mind. And now it was looking at her for answers. A flickering interface crackled to life on the console in front of her, ancient runes and symbols scrolling past. They were unlike any standard galactic script, older, more complex. Yet, as the neural link stabilized, they began to shift, morphing into something she could understand. System reboot, 12%. Primary weapon systems, offline. Navigation, damaged. Neural core stability, critical. The Titan was barely holding together. Rina's gut tightened. She needed help. Disconnecting from the console, she turned and sprinted back through the wreckage, leaping over fallen beams and shattered bulkheads. If the Titan was waking up, it wouldn't be long before someone noticed. And if the wrong people found out, they'd tear this ship apart before it ever had a chance to recover. She activated her comms. Driven pickup? Static. She swore under her breath. The scrapyard's interference was brutal, but she kept trying. Driven, I don't care if you're hungover or dead. Get on the damn line. A groggy voice finally came through. Rina? You sound pissed. You need me too. I need you to move your ass to Dock 17. Now. That woke him up. There was a pause before he replied, voice sharper now. What did you find? Something big. And I mean big. Another pause, then a sigh. You owe me a drink for this. The line cut. Driven wasn't a mechanic like her, but he knew how to move in places she couldn't. Ex-smuggler, ex-mercenary, ex-everything, he had a reputation for getting things done if the price was right. She trusted him more than most, which wasn't saying much. She reached the edge of the wreck, hauling herself over a jagged bulkhead just as a shadow loomed overhead. A sleek, black hovercraft touched down in the distance, kicking up dust as its engines whined in protest. The side hatch opened, revealing Driven leaning against the frame, arms crossed. Tell me this isn't another half-broken death trap, he called. Rina marched toward him. It's worse. Driven's expression darkened, but he waved her in. Get in. We're talking on the move. She climbed inside, slamming the doors shut as the hovercraft lifted off. Driven wasted no time. All right. Spill. Rina ran a hand through her short, grease-streaked hair, trying to organize her thoughts. It's a Titan. Silence. Driven stared at her. A Titan? As in the myths. As in the things that wiped out entire armadas before vanishing without a trace. Driven let out a low whistle. Hell? She leaned forward. It's alive, Drive. Not fully, but enough. I made contact and she hesitated. It chose me. Driven didn't speak for a long moment. Then he exhaled. That's bad. She shot him a glare. Excuse me? He tapped the side console, bringing up a radar display. You think no one else is looking for something like this? If a Titan's waking up, the galaxy's gonna come down on this scrapyard like a meteor storm. Corporations, warlords, the damn council. Everyone. Rina swallowed hard. She already knew that. Driven continued. What's its condition? Barely operational. Core systems are shot, neural stability is hanging by a thread, and I don't even know if it has a functional engine. But it's aware. Driven rubbed his temples. Then we don't have time. You need to get that thing moving now. Rina clenched her fists. I know, but it's too damaged. I need. An alarm blared. Driven cursed, slamming his hand onto the controls. The radar display flickered, then showed incoming ships. Not scrapyard security. Something worse. Rina's stomach dropped as she recognized the signature. Damaris Syndicate, one of the largest mercenary factions in the sector. Ruthless, well-funded, and known for tearing apart wrecks like carrion birds. If they were here, they already knew about the Titan. Driven's expression hardened. Looks like someone beat us to the punch. The hovercraft banked hard as Dreven gunned the engines, weaving through the scrapyard's labyrinth of debris. Rinna gritted her teeth. She didn't know how, but they must have picked up the Titan's signal when she rebooted it. She should have been more careful. The comm crackled. A cold voice came through. "This is Captain Luther of the Damaris Syndicate. We know what you have. Surrender the wreck and walk away, and we won't turn you into dust." Dreven cut the transmission, face grim. Rinna stared out the window at the distant silhouette of the Titan, still hidden beneath the layers of scrap. No, she had chosen it, and now she was going to fight for it. "Dreve," she said, voice steady. He glanced at her. "Get me back to the Titan?" His eyebrows shot up. "You want to take cover inside the thing that barely works?" She grinned. "No, I want to wake it up." Dreven hesitated, then let out a sharp laugh. "You're insane." The hovercraft swung around, engines roaring as it made a beeline back to Dock 17. Behind them, the Syndicate's ships descended like vultures. Rinna took a deep breath, already preparing to reconnect with the Titan systems. She just had to survive long enough to give it a reason to fight back. The Titan was waiting. Rinna felt its presence pressing against her mind the moment she re-entered the wreckage. It wasn't just damaged, it was dying. The ship's neural core pulsed weakly through the interface, barely holding itself together. The systems were failing, the power reserves collapsing. The Titan wasn't going to wake up, not unless she did something drastic. Dreven skidded to a halt behind her, pistol drawn. "Rinna, we don't have time. The Syndicate's already deploying ground teams. They'll be swarming this place in minutes." "I know," she snapped, hands flying across the console. The Titan's language had fully translated now, and she could see the extent of the damage. The neural core was functional, but something was blocking it from reactivating completely. A security lock. An old, ancient failsafe buried deep within its systems. Something that hadn't been meant to be removed. Dreven peered over her shoulder. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster." Rinna took a sharp breath, fingers hovering over the interface. If she disengaged the lock, there was no telling what would happen. The Titan could wake up, or it could completely collapse. No time to hesitate. She slammed her neural link into the system. The world fractured. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness. Then, memories. They weren't hers. Blinding flashes of war. Ships crumbling into nothing. Titan-class warforms tearing through entire fleets like they were made of glass. Pain. The memory of falling, of being destroyed. A name echoed through the void. Kairos. Rinna gasped, wrenching herself back into reality. The Titan lurched. The wreck trembled as dormant power surged through its veins, long-dead systems flaring to life in a cascade of golden energy. The interface glowed, the ancient text now clear as daylight. Kairos systems rebooting. Power restoration, 38%. Primary weapons, offline. Neural link, active. A voice resonated through the ship. Designation, Kairos. Titan-class warform. Primary directive. The voice stuttered, glitching. Error. Directive overridden. Rinna's breath caught. The security lock was gone, and the Titan was awake. Dreven let out a sharp curse as the ship shifted, metal groaning as it moved for the first time in centuries. "You actually did it," he breathed. Rinna barely heard him. Her mind was still reeling from what she had seen, from what she felt. The Titan wasn't just a machine. It had a mind, a past, and it had been designed to kill gods. A warning blared from the console. Intruder alert. Multiple hostile signatures detected. Syndicate troops. Dreven snapped back into focus, reloading his weapon. "We need to move. Now." Rinna nodded, still shaking. She grabbed the console, forcing herself back into the Titan's neural interface. "Kairos," she said aloud. "Can you fight?" The ship shuddered. Power insufficient. Weapon systems offline. Defensive capabilities limited. Not good. Rinna clenched her jaw. "Then we're doing this manually." She turned to Dreven. "Cover me. I'm getting us in the air." Dreven raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's a good idea?" "Nope." She slid into the Titan's central control pod. "But it's the only one we've got." Outside, The first Syndicate soldiers appeared, dark figures moving through the scrapyard ruins. They were heavily armed, their weapons humming with plasma energy. Driven fired first. A Syndicate enforcer went down, but the others immediately returned fire. The air lit up with streaks of burning blue as energy rounds tore through the wreckage. Rina ignored the chaos, fingers flying across the console. The Titan's thrusters were ancient, half-broken, but intact. If she could reroute the remaining power. Come on, come on. An explosion rocked the hull. They've got heavy ordnance. Driven shouted. Rina, any day now would be great. The Titan system screamed as she forced a power cycle, energy roaring through its veins. Then, flight systems engaged. The world tilted. Driven yelped as the entire wreck rose from the scrapyard, dust and debris cascading off its massive frame. The Syndicate soldiers stumbled, shouting as the Titan came to life. Rina let out a ragged breath. They were airborne. But before she could even celebrate, the radar flared with a new warning. Multiple warships detected. Rina's blood ran cold. The Syndicate hadn't come alone. Driven stared at the display in horror. You have got to be kidding me. 4 capital-class destroyers were descending from orbit, their massive cannons already locking onto the Titan. Rina swallowed hard. She had woken up a god. And now, the galaxy was coming to kill it. The Titan Kairos shuddered as the atmospheric pressure changed. Rina could hear the distant whine of stabilizers fighting against the sheer force of gravity. The Syndicate's destroyers were moving into formation, their energy cannons already glowing with a terrifying golden light. A full orbital bombardment. Rina, Driven barked, bracing himself against the console as the ship trembled. They're not playing around. We have maybe 60 seconds before we're vaporized. She barely heard him. Her fingers flew across the controls, digging deep into the Titan's buried systems. There had to be something she could use, some remnant of its former power. Her pulse pounded in her ears. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving something. If the Syndicate destroyed Kairos here, then it was over. The last of the Titan war forms would be erased from history, a relic of a forgotten past, lost in the void. And Rina would not let that happen. She took a deep breath. Kairos, she said firmly, I need everything you've got. For a moment, there was silence. Then, directive override acknowledged. The Titan's core roared to life. Power surged through its ancient frame, the neural interface burning against Rina's mind. The ship was still damaged, still on the brink of collapse, but it was no longer helpless. It was awake. Driven's eyes went wide as golden energy cascaded across the hull, forming intricate, ancient symbols that pulsed with forgotten might. The Syndicate warships must have detected the spike, because suddenly their weapons fired. The sky turned white. Rina barely had time to react. Evasive maneuvers, engaged. Kairos moved. For something so massive, it should have been impossible. The Titan was the size of a city, a behemoth of metal and power. And yet, in the span of a breath, it shifted, twisting through the air as the first wave of energy lances screamed past its hull. The Syndicate pilots hesitated. They had expected a corpse, not a god reborn. Rina, I hope you got a plan. Driven shouted, barely able to stay on his feet. She did. It was insane, but it was the only option. We're taking the fight to them, she growled. Driven paled. I was afraid you were going to say that. The Syndicate destroyers were repositioning, adapting. Rina knew she had seconds before they fired again, and Kairos wouldn't survive another volley at this range, unless she made them hesitate. She reached deep into the interface, past the weapon systems and flight controls, deep into Kairos's core, and she spoke with its voice. This is the Titan Kairos. Her words thundered across the battlefield, transmitted in every known language. Ancient, powerful, undeniable. I am not your enemy. But if you stand against me, she let the Titan speak. I will remind the stars why they once feared my name. The Syndicate hesitated. That was all she needed. Kairos, she whispered, give me weapons. The ship obeyed. Deep beneath the hull, long-dead reactors awoke. Ancient mechanisms, rusted and broken, rebuilt themselves in real time. The Titan's wrath, locked away for millennia, began to stir. The destroyers fired again. This time, Kairos fired back. The sky exploded. Golden beams of ancient energy tore through the void, ripping apart the incoming plasma lances like they were made of paper. Syndicate shielding shattered, entire decks crumbling under the sheer force of weaponry that should not have existed. One of the destroyers detonated instantly, the shockwave shaking the battlefield. The others panicked. Rinna could hear the transmissions coming through the console, voices screaming. What is that firepower? Impossible. The Titan class was extinct. Retreat! Retreat! But it was too late. Kairos was awake. Rinna pushed the ship forward, moving like an unstoppable force. The remaining Syndicate ships scrambled to reposition, but the Titan was faster, smarter, merciless. A second destroyer fell, torn apart by a barrage of energy spears. The third tried to escape, only to be caught by an unseen force. Its hull crushed like a tin as Kairos activated an ancient graviton field. The fourth was the only one left. Rinna hesitated. The captain was begging for mercy. Please, we surrender. For a moment, she thought about it. Then she remembered the millions the Syndicate had slaughtered. The colonies burned. The planets silenced. She let Kairos decide. The Titan's answer was final. A single, blinding pulse of golden energy erased the final ship from existence. Silence fell over the battlefield. Driven exhaled slowly. Well, that was something. Rinna didn't respond. She was still gripping the console, her entire body trembling. It was done. The Syndicate had lost. The Titan Kairos had returned. But Rinna knew this was only the beginning, because the rest of the galaxy had just witnessed what had happened. And they were coming. For the first time since awakening, Kairos fell silent. The battlefield was empty now. Nothing but twisted metal, flickering embers, and the cold remnants of the Syndicate's fallen fleet. Rinna slumped against the console, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The neural link had drained her, pushing her beyond anything she had ever experienced. She could feel Kairos inside her mind, not just as a ship, not just as a weapon, but as something more, a presence, a will. And it had chosen her. Driven let out a low whistle as he surveyed the wreckage. Well, that escalated fast. Rinna shot him a look. Understatement of the century. She forced herself to stand, shaking off the exhaustion that threatened to pull her under. There was no time to rest. The entire galaxy had just seen what happened. The Syndicate was finished here, but they weren't the only ones watching. A sharp beep from the console confirmed her fears. Incoming transmissions. Kairos reported, its voice as steady as ever. High-priority galactic channels. Multiple factions attempting contact. Driven groaned. Let me guess. Everyone and their ancestors wants a piece of us now. Rinna didn't answer. She was staring at the holographic display as the names of powerful factions scrolled past. The Terran Union. The Valzaran Emissaries. The Core Concordat. The High Order of the Celestial Forge. And at the very top, the Galactic Tribunal. Rinna exhaled slowly. They're not here to negotiate, she murmured. They're here because they're afraid. Driven folded his arms. I mean, can you blame them? You just single-handedly woke up a Titan-class warform and wiped out a Syndicate battle group like it was target practice. She turned toward the console. Kairos, what's our current power status? Primary reactor at 42% functionality, the Titan responded. Weapon systems at 63% efficiency. Structural integrity at 78%. Shields undergoing recalibration. Rinna frowned. Not bad, but not great. They had power, but nowhere near what they needed for a prolonged conflict. If the Galactic Tribunal decided to intervene now, they were in trouble. She clenched her fists. She wasn't about to hand over Kairos to a bunch of bureaucrats who didn't even understand what they were dealing with. Driven scratched his head. So, what's the play? Run? Negotiate? Scare the hell out of them. Rinna glanced at the screen again. She could see it, the shifting tides of power, the fears spreading through the galactic factions. The balance of the galaxy had changed today, and she wasn't about to let someone else decide what came next. We're not running, she said firmly. We're making a statement. Driven blinked. A statement? She gestured to the console. Kairos, open a wideband transmission to every major faction. The ship complied instantly. Across the galaxy, from the polished halls of the Galactic Tribunal to the war-forged bastions of the Terran Union, a single voice echoed across the stars. This is Rina Velos, acting commander of the Titan-class warform Kairos. Silence. The galaxy was listening. You've seen what happened today, she continued, her voice steady, unyielding. You've seen what the Syndicate tried to do. You've seen how they fell. A pause. This ship, the Titan Kairos, has chosen its pilot. And I have made my choice. Her hands gripped the console. I will not be your pawn. I will not be your weapon. I will not kneel before the broken governments that allowed this war to happen. Her next words sent shockwaves through every galactic channel. The Age of Titans is not over. Driven's jaw dropped. Rina, what the hell are you? But she wasn't finished. From this moment forward, the Titan Kairos will not serve any empire, any council, or any faction. We answer to no one. The comm channels exploded with reactions. Some demanded she surrender immediately. Others offered alliances. The tribunal branded her a dangerous rogue entity. And yet, there was something else in those voices. Something she had never expected. Hope. She could hear it in the whispered messages from distant colonies. From rebel fighters. From refugees fleeing the wars of the core worlds. From those who had lost everything. To them, she wasn't a threat. She was a spark. A sign that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy wasn't beyond saving. Kairos hummed in her mind. And for the first time since its awakening, it felt truly alive. Rina's declaration had been more than just words. It was a challenge to the entire order of power. In the days following the transmission, every major faction scrambled to respond. The Galactic Tribunal branded her a rogue commander and declared the Titan a threat to stability. The Terran Union, more cautious, attempted to negotiate, though the underlying message was clear. Hand over the Titan, or else. But it was the outer worlds, the forgotten colonies, the exiled, the lost who responded the loudest. To them, Rina was not a criminal. She was a beacon. Whispers turned into movements. Movements turned into uprisings. For the first time in centuries, the factions that ruled the galaxy with iron and fire found themselves facing something they could not control. Hope. Rina stood on the bridge of Kairos, staring out at the vast nebula before her. The ship was alive. She could feel it pulsing beneath her fingertips. The neural link was no longer just a conduit. It was a bond. Kairos had been a weapon once. A Titan built for war, abandoned, forgotten. But now it was something else. Driven leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. So, what's the next move? Fearless leader? Rina smirked. You actually calling me that now? Hey, you hijack an ancient Titan and piss off the entire galactic order in one day. You earn the title. She exhaled, her gaze drifting across the bridge. The crew had changed. What had started as a handful of survivors was now something more. Fighters, exiles, mechanics, pilots, refugees, all drawn by the same thing. A future that didn't belong to the old empires. They had nowhere else to go, and so they had chosen her, just like Kairos had. She tapped a control panel, bringing up a star map. Dozens of uncharted regions flickered across the display. Forgotten ruins, old battlefields, places where history had been buried and rewritten. But she knew the truth now. Kairos wasn't the only Titan left. Reports are coming in from the Outer Rim, she murmured. Wreckage sites, other lost war forms. Driven let out a low whistle. You think there are more out there? Like him? Rina didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed a hand against the console, letting Kairos speak to her. A low hum filled her mind. Memories, pieces of the past. A great fleet of Titans standing together. Then silence. Ruin. Betrayal. Somewhere, out in the darkness, there were more. Waiting. Forgotten. Sleeping. And if Kairos had survived, so had they. Her grip tightened. We're going to find them. Driven arched a brow. And then what? Build an army? Take over the galaxy? Rina smirked. No. We're going to wake them up. Because this wasn't just about a war. It was about rewriting history, about taking back the future that had been stolen. The galaxy had forgotten what the Titans were. It was time to remind them. Kairos pulsed beneath her, a single, wordless confirmation. The Titan had chosen, and the war for the future had just begun. Far beyond the known sectors, deep within an uncharted ruin, something stirred. Metal groaned, energy flickered, and from the darkness, an ancient voice whispered through dead circuits. "Kairos, is that you?" Then silence, but not for long.